Welcome to a special podcast series brought to you by Clary, where we're here to spread the insights and expertise given at our hosted event. Charge at Dreamforce, we've gathered revenue leaders from across the industry to provide you with valuable insights, strategies, and knowledge that can supercharge your revenue growth. These bonus episodes will be dropping on Wednesdays, designed exclusively for you. If you like having more revenue insights in your podcast feed, let us know so we can do more bonus content for you in the future. Let's dive in.
Our topic this morning is running revenue like a process. And, there's a reason I'm still here 5 years later and Matt's still in his job 6 years later, is because to do this and to scale these companies, you really have to think about things as a process. And if I kind of rewind the tape on my time at Clary, I'll sort of evolve our conversation today. There's these moments that happen across the 4 quarters of each year, right? We live our lives in these 3-month increments, and there's 4 of them every year. And they're not all the same, depending on the types of businesses we have. Sometimes Q4 is different than Q1 and how you think about them. And then as you start to dissect each of the quarters, right, it's 13 weeks. And what you do in week 1 isn't necessarily what you do in week 5, isn't necessarily what you do in week 12 and 13. And so we started to think about all of the revenue moments that happen across the 13 weeks of each quarter so that you can drive predictable revenue. And you start to think about, everyone does the basics, right? Everybody will do sales rep, manager one-on-ones, forecast calls. Maybe you're doing a top of funnel call. Maybe you're doing an out quarter forecast call. Maybe you're doing a slip deal review. But every week there's these moments that happen that you need to be able to drive, not just with a team, not just with multiple teams, but globally, to create a predictable revenue process. And so I started writing these down in a Google Doc back then and sort of capturing what do we do in week 1, 2, and 3. And pretty soon it started getting filled in. And there was some of this I was able to do in my platform, Clary, and there were others that we were doing outside. And my goal became, I wanted to run everything from one place. And so the topic today is about running revenue like a process and really thinking about the cadences or the moments that happen. And with Matt and Ashley, what I wanted to talk to you two about is what are some of the major moments that you run in your business that allow you to drive predictable, repeatable results?
This is my 9th growth company, so VC backed or within a public company, I grew something. And the one thing that VC companies do when they hire me is they know they're going to get predictable forecasting. And it's a little bit mad scientist stuff that I've done in my career. I did it through just a lot of conversation, discovery, Google Sheets, and at Highspot, I was doing that until I got introduced to Clary. But I left tech and went into I worked for Sunrun. And I helped Sunrun build their go-to-market solar business. And their headquarters are right down the street. And I was in the B2C business, what I'd never done before, and I had to learn how to sell widgets. And we weren't a quarterly business, we were a monthly business. And predicting B2C is very different than predicting B2B. And trying to figure out how many widgets am I selling, so I had to get really good at figuring out how many of those widgets were going to be sold that month. And I did it with a Google Sheet and a lot of questions. So fast forward to Highspot, I was running our business basically off of Google Sheets, a lot of questions with my managers and directors globally. And it was really hard. I was a mad scientist, but I was able to predict to our board and everybody within a couple percentage point how we were going to do. Well, I got introduced to Clary, and then all of a sudden I realized there was a tool available to me that can allow me to sort of relinquish some of the things I was thinking of and start building more predictability and having very different conversations with our managers. And so I've had Clary now for 4 years, I think. And as I got more comfortable with the tool, I started getting more comfortable with letting things go from my mad scientist sort of mentality and letting the tool sort of do some things for me, whether it's weekly numbers, whether it's predictability or how the forecast is going. I wasn't using my own method of madness. Recently, though, I've now gotten more support from my RevOps team. We're really building out our RevOps team. And so I build another cadence into how we do this. And that is I'm building a weekly forecast, which starts with my frontline managers and rolls all the way up for me. And they have a script that they have to fill out, leveraging Clary, leveraging also things outside of Clary that we use. And so it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday process. And by Thursday, I have the script all filled out. I use Clary to go through it, the two meet, and I have more predictability in my method. there's still little mad scientists. There's always that. You do need, I think as sales leaders, we do need our gut to help us. Yeah. Tools don't always get us there, but there are ways to do it easier today than there was in previous companies.
For sure.
Yeah.
And, as we think about this, my CEO and I, Andy Byrne, we started to take this to our customers, what we called a revenue blueprint. We would ask them, do you have a revenue blueprint? Typically what we get is no or kinda. And so kinda meant like there were processes that were being run, but it was never documented. So we actually started to help our customers document their revenue cadences and then actually build a journey to get them into clarity. And so Ashley, as you're starting 4 weeks in, by the way, thank you for doing this, because I know I remember those first 4 weeks was like swimming, and the first 4 months is swimming too. I'm sure you're just trying to get your hands on it, and you're probably starting to think about, okay, what are the revenue moments and how am I going to get command over them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now I'm still trying to map out like what is the blueprint, right? What's our tech stack? But in my mind, there are many moments that matter. It's a little bit like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. Yeah. Like you're done, you're going to go back and review it again, you'll do it again, right? And you'll do that every year ad nauseum. However, there are 2 moments that I really pay close attention to. One is like the monthly forecasting and pipeline call. And the thought around that is like, your revenue is basically baked a couple months before it's supposed to be recognized. And if it's not showing up then, it won't show up later. And if it does show up later, it's probably garbage, right? It's like, it's pipeline stuffing at the absolute end of the quarter. And so you just know, so that monthly cadence, that tells me a couple things. One is it tells me that we're doing the right things day to day. And then the other is it gives me comfort 2 or 3 months out when we're going to recognize that revenue. The other though, that matters a lot to me is relevant to my relationship or the go-to-market team's relationship with product. That can take the form of, I guess in the Clary revenue moments, the moments that matter, it's like the lost deal conversation. Mm-hmm. But really it's like, what can you show? Because product at some point is going to get tired of hearing that like we don't have something and that's why we lost this deal. What can we show them that really demonstrates the impact of it? Yeah. And so there are a couple things around that. Like, first of all, we always say like it's never an L for loss, it's an L for learning. Like if we don't learn anything from it, it is a loss, right? So like delivering the details around the deal back to product, but also from like a conversational intelligence perspective, that in my mind is one of the most powerful tools for feedback to product. So obviously you have your pipeline, your pipeline and your loss reasons, and those can be quantified and packaged and sent back to product. But once you color that with conversational intelligence, you can say, for example, when we mentioned this ancillary product, win rates went down or win rates went up. And that is itself a call to action for the product team to be like, well, why? Yeah. And so that's a revenue moment that matters in the longer term, right? It's like, how are we being the best partners, the MVPs to our product team by using revenue tools that we have in our Roadhouse? You
mentioned trying to run predictable but linear business month to month, and you did too, Matt. And I think when you run a SaaS company, being able to actually drive linearity is huge, because if you're hitting 25% month 1 and 25% month 2, that you're probably going to overachieve your quarter, right? If you're sticking to that, and if you accelerate more in earlier months, you're gonna overachieve. If you're not, you're gonna miss. And so being able to impact linearity in a SaaS business is huge. One of the things that we've done at Clary for years is what we called a sequence of events. So these were skip level calls that we would do in the last month of the quarter. So with 4 weeks to go, we'd do 1. With 3 weeks to go, we'd do 2. With 2 weeks to go, we'd do 3. And then we'd go every day until we went through all the inventory. And in these calls, we would get all the reps on who had deals still to close. And we would go through, okay, do you know your sequence of events? And some of my reps are in the room. Remember when these were calls. Do you know your sequence of events to close this deal with your customer? And it would mean things like, you got to get aligned on commercials. You got to get aligned on signature. You got to align on security, all those major moments. And it was this, we started doing them once a quarter, and we could see how quickly we could get alignment on doing business. So we started accelerating them and doing them every month. So based on if you had an opportunity closing that month, you were on a sequence of events call. Now, this takes a lot of time to do, right? All of a sudden, you're basically doing deal inspection every day. And it was the last major moment of my cadence that was not instrumented in a solution. It was so manual. We got lucky, and I'm gonna do a little Clary pitch here, but we got lucky and acquired a company called DealPoint. It's a mutual action plan. Now all of a sudden, I could bring buyer and seller together in a collaborative environment around all these milestones that were based on a template that was our sequence of events, and now it's automated. And now we don't have to go through those big lengthy calls. We still do them, but not to the level we did because the data is now updated all the time. We're not interrogating a rep to get it, but the rep has the data there and we can look at it through common lens. So for me, that was one moment that had a huge impact on the business, and especially as we scaled, I could now roll this out to other geos, other segments, et cetera. We're all here scaling businesses, right? When you think about hiring new teams in Europe or APAC or bringing on a new segment or going after a new industry, what are some of the maybe revenue cadences that you drive that are consistent, that you know if they're being followed, you can see they're being followed versus aren't being followed that might impact the business? Matt?
Yeah, I will go to a little bit what you were just talking about is pipeline generation. We look at it every other week. We changed our business model a year ago where we had a unique model where our ADRs did all the prospecting for our AEs. In May of last year, we switched it to a traditional model where AEs also had to do, our ADRs, our BDRs.
You almost got me in trouble there for a minute. My reps would be like, where are we prospecting?
Yeah, it's a wonderful model until it isn't, and I can talk about it offline. But we now make our AEs prospect. But every 2 weeks, we look at pipeline generation. We look at very closely and know how many opportunities we're generating, pipelines, and we look at it globally because then we can see in new markets how they're doing. My ANZ market is doing exceptionally well. They're only 8 months into it. We can see that they're trending well, they're doing the right work. But I have existing markets where it's a little slower because they have a lot of late stage opportunities. So you have to make sure you're paying attention to this. So we look very closely to pipeline, but we also look very closely to no decision. No decision is our biggest competitor. No decision by far is our biggest competitor. So we look at no decision and understand why was there no decision. And we look at all the closed loss, no decision reasons. And if I see no response, no need, that's all rep driven. They weren't able to get to above the line people. Those above the line as VP or higher. So that's the third thing we track. Are your conversations with people that have authority? And if those conversations with people without authority and you're not generating pipeline and you're seeing no decision, you're probably having the wrong conversations. And we look at that globally.
Yeah, that's a really good call. At Square, there was I built an SMB, a mid-market, and an enterprise practice. But for SMB and mid-market, it is a super high velocity business. We were looking at pipeline generated on a weekly basis. We had to. Like there were deals needed to close every week by the dozen, and then by the hundred and thousands, et cetera, across every region. And so that was something we tracked pretty clearly. And it just made it like a no surprises kind of thing, because we could see that our win rates would approximately hold over the course of the year. We could hope for some upticks, and we, ever so often there was some fluctuation there, but for the most part it holds. And so the single most important driver on our end was pipeline generation.
Wow.
Interesting that you called out the reasons. I think that's something that I'd like to dig into in my current role is the not loss reasons, but the win rates differ pretty dramatically by market.
Yep.
And it's like, well, why? And so that's an area I'd really like to inspect. And now I'm just talking out loud about doing my job. Thanks.
Also, and when it comes to pipeline generation, I think that I got caught doing this.
Yeah.
You got to be really careful about dollars versus opportunities, because your pipeline can look healthy, but only 2 deals got you there. You also have to really make sure
that concentration risk scares me.
Yeah, because one of my leaders be like, "Oh, we just killed our pipeline. We generated $5 million this month."
You're like, but one guy did it.
One guy did it. So that goes away. What are you doing?
Right.
You have to really pay attention to both.
Right.
Because you gotta manage the portfolio.
That's an interesting call out. Is like, I forgot the quote. It's like, inspect what you expect, and your reps will respect what you inspect, right? And so even if they're not directly comped on pipeline, those things matter, and we show it matters by inspecting it. So that model is important to me, just like because it matters to me, we expect our managers to bring it up in every single meeting.
I love how earlier too you said we want to learn on a loss.
Yeah.
Right. And I always say all news is good news, right? Just as long as you know something. Yeah. And as we think about, you always have these slip deals happen, right? No matter how good you are, you're going to have something that slips. And one of the things that we've really worked hard on in one of our cadences is how do we think about slip deals? And by the way, there's the founder of Deal Point, Tom. I gave Alina a nice plug earlier, but as one of my moments. So on slip deals, one of the things we do is if a seller is going to slip a deal, they have to give a reason for why it slipped. So now we actually know, okay, this was competitive, this was price, this was no decision. But now marketing has an opportunity to go back into that group that slipped for a reason and go, okay, how do we either accelerate this? How do we re-nurture this? Where did we go wrong? So that we have a process that happens after something slips. And sometimes slip might just be someone doesn't want to take on the risk of putting in the forecast. Well, then I've got a way to pull that back in quickly. But we really look at and think about slips. And, funny, Sunday nights is when people start getting slacks from me when I see things slip and I want to, and I can't understand from the reasons. So that's one of our major cadences is a pretty good slip deal rigor.
I'll plug Clary.
Yeah.
Because this is my favorite tool in Clary. I do look at it Sunday when I'm either watching the Premier League or I'm watching a night football game. It depends on the time of day, and then and I have it already set that I can go and look at all flip deals from the previous week. And that was one of the early tools that I wanted. Clary had it. It's still what I live in because reps are going to move it, so I can go look at region. I can understand it. We had $1 million slip out of our last week's pipeline. Why? And then if I see the close date is 2 weeks after the end of the quarter, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There has to be a way you can pull this back in. It's just a rep error. And just to go off for another tangent is, I never understood why the last day of the quarter or the last week of the quarter is any different than the first week of the quarter. In my world, I just don't understand it. And when I worked at Sunrun, this is consumer-based business. We still did 70% of our business on the last day of the quarter. You really think a consumer's waiting till the last day of a quarter to close on it's 100% rep driven.
Yeah.
And there should be, and I always say to my team, there should be no difference between the last day and the first day, and your close dates have to be accurate. So I'm plugging Clary product, but that is a really, really important functionality.
I mean, look, it makes all of our lives easier. If we're not pushing everything to the last moment, we stress customers, we stress our own machine, we stress ourselves. So if we can drive linear businesses, obviously it's a changer for all of us.
Yeah.
So I think what you're hearing from all of this is that revenue isn't just about going and selling and running up a forecast, but it's about understanding your business and creating the moments across the 13 weeks, across the 4 quarters that you need to instrument so that you can drive predictable revenue. So you get real-time feedback from how are you doing against your plan, where if I experiment, can I make a change, what's working, what's not. And for those of us that are students of scale, you have to have these repeatable processes and cadences. And what we try and do at Clary is help our customers instrument these, think about them, and get them in the platform so that they can do this. Matt, Ashley, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning and sharing your wisdom and experiences. And best of luck.
Thank you.
You're getting above water in your 4 weeks in. And
thank you.
Matt, we're on turning the next page, right?
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.